My top 10 favorite national parks hikes on NP₃. Hi there, welcome to NP₃, the National Parks Photography Program, and today I'm going to be going over my top 10 favorite hikes in the National Park System. Now, before I get started, a couple of ground rules for what constitutes the top 10. Obviously, I haven't been on every hike in every park, so I'm sure that there are fantastic hikes that totally belong on this list that I haven't done. So I have to have been on it. Two, I have to have done the whole hike. So there's a couple of them, and I'll get to those in a minute, where they really ought to be on this list, but for one reason or another I didn't quite make the whole hike, and so I've included those as honorable mentions or not at all. And three, it's just, there's no real objective way to say what is a top hike in the park. So of course it's my opinion, but I just love these sorts of lists, and it's fun to put them together. And of the videos I make, these are sort of the ones I have the most fun with, because it's fun thinking back to all of the different experiences I've had and things I've seen, and how do they rank? Did I like this one better than that one? And it can be it's very difficult to it's like you sometimes picking your favorite children or something like that. So anyways, this is my subjective list of the top 10 hikes in the National Park System. Before I get to number 10, I've got a few honorable mentions to go through. First is Grand Portal at Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. And there is sort of the main trail that goes across the lakeshore of Lake Superior across Pictured Rocks. And Grand Portal is one of the major sort of prominent outcroppings in the Pictured Rocks actual cliff section in the western part of the park. And so you'll catch this part of the hike if you're doing, I think it's 50 miles all the way across the park. But sort of the most common way to get there is if you drive to the Chapel parking area, and then you can do it as a loop from the parking area out to Chapel Beach, and then across to Mosquito, and then back. And great classic lakefront scenery with the cliffs, and when you get out to Grand Portal, these views up and down the lake and back towards the Pictured Rocks themselves. And so amazing hike there. The second honorable mention is the hike up alongside Upper Yosemite Falls in Yosemite National Park. And this is one that I did with my friend Craig several years ago. And you start from the valley floor and you climb up, literally up, alongside Upper Yosemite Falls. And so it takes a couple miles of hiking sort of to get up to where you get the view of the falls. And you're walking and you're getting sprayed with some of the mist off of the falls, and just amazing scenery. The reason that this is an honorable mention and not in a list is we're starting to wear down, so we didn't quite make it all the way up to the top of the falls for one of the most iconic views. So definitely worth it. I'm sure if I had done the whole hike, it would be a top 10, as would some of the other great. I haven't done Half Dome or some of the iconic hikes. When I was there, Tuolumne Meadows was covered in snow, so I haven't done any of the hikes in the meadows. So there's several hikes in Yosemite that I'm sure would make this top 10 list, but according to the rules, I can't include them, so honorable mention for Upper Yosemite Falls. My next honorable mention is the Hoh Rainforest in Olympic National Park, and this is an out and back that we did, and in fact, and I'll include a link to it, I've done a video just on my favorite photo from Olympic National Park, and I've also done a video on an overview of Olympic National Park. But my favorite hike that I did there was in the Hoh Rainforest, and just tremendous iconic rainforest scenery, and great hike. And it's a testament to the quality of this list and all of the hikes in the national park that this didn't even make the top 10, because the Hoh Rainforest is amazing and a great hike. My second to last honorable mention is Angel's Landing at Zion National Park. and there is no doubt in my mind that this would be a contender for number one if I had had the guts to do it. I got up past Walter's Wiggles and to the chain section, and climbed up the first section with the chain to the first sort of landing past. I think that's Boy Scout landing where the chain start. And I was going up the chain thinking, oh, I'm almost there. And then I saw the crazy narrow part that's, like a sheer drop off on either side. And I'm not a tremendously scared of heights person, but I was not prepared for I was not prepared for that. So definitely on the list to get up the guts to do Angel's Landing. But this is one of the iconic hikes in all of the park system, and so shame I didn't get there. But as soon as I complete that someday, I'm sure it's going on the top 10. And then finally, the Devil's Garden Loop in Arches National Park. And there's a couple of great hikes in Arches. And this Devil's Garden Loop is probably the longest of sort of the main designated trails that you get to, the real accessible trails. And you can do this as an out and back. It's pretty easy to just take it out to Landscape Arch. But if you keep going, it's a really fun. It's not super long. I want to say it's 5 or 6 miles. It's not a super long hike, but it's really fun. You have to be fit enough, not so much cardiovascularly fit, but there's some areas where you kind of have to wiggle through some rocks and figure out how you're going to navigate through. It's not the most groomed hike that you'll ever come across, but that's kind of what makes it fun too. So again, great hike and very close to my top 10. But having gone through the honorable mentions, now we will get to the list. At number 10 is the hike to High Dune at Great Sand Dunes National Park. And my buddy Craig and I did this. This was some years ago now. And it's not really a trail as such because you can kind of go into the dunes any which way you want. But the hike to High Dunes it's really fun. It is a lot of work because you're on sand the whole way, and you're already at the start of it, well over a mile in elevation. And you have to go over a couple smaller dunes before you get to High Dune, which is the second highest dune in the park. And so when you're going uphill, it's really, 3 feet up, and then you slide 2 feet back, and then the next step, 3 feet up, slide 2 feet back, and it is so much work getting up these dunes. It's really cool and beautiful views, and it really pays off with just some completely unique scenery that you don't see many places in the Park Service. I suppose there's a couple places in Death Valley or in the Mojave Desert, which there's some dune areas. But it's right along a mountain range, and just real beautiful scenery and completely different from anything else I've done, and a lot of fun. Number 9 on the list is the Ladder Trail at Acadia National Park. I talked a bit about this in my Acadia Park overview, which I'll link to. But this is one. Now, when my wife and I were there, the park was mostly closed due to the government shutdown. So instead of just being able to drive right up to Cadillac Mountain, we had to take the Ladder Trail, which was a ton of work. It gains, about 1,500 feet on the way up, and some of it very steep, some of it literally climbing up ladders. But actually a really rewarding way to go from basically sea level up to the top of Cadillac Mountain over the course of a hike, maybe a 10-mile round trip. And just a really rewarding hike and great views, and it gets you to some areas that if you just drove up to Cadillac Mountain you wouldn't see, other ridges and other vistas. So the Ladder Trail is great fun. It probably would be eclipsed by the Precipice Trail if I had a chance to do it as my favorite park in Acadia, but being that I wasn't able to access the trailhead or easily access the trailhead for the Precipice Trail, the Ladder Trail, great on its own right, and number 9 on the list. At number 8 is the hike to Guadalupe Peak in Guadalupe Mountains National Park. And this is one where my wife and I were on our way back from Arizona, and we decided to make a stop at Guadalupe Mountains, and kind of in the evening, and the rangers were telling us, oh, well, I think you'll be able to make it before dark. And so we headed out, and we were passing people on the way who thought we were crazy trying to get up there, but we made really good time and got up to the top of Guadalupe Peak, which is the highest point in Texas. And I think it's just around 10,000 feet. It's pretty high. So you're dealing with low oxygen levels and uphill climbing. So it's a strenuous hike. But you get to the top and you're at the highest point in Texas. Panoramic views. There's a monument up there that I believe it was American Airlines left many years ago. And so they have a check-in book that you can sign, and views of Guadalupe Mountains El Capitan, not to be confused with Yosemite's El Capitan, but looking down on El Capitan there, and beautiful hike, beautiful scenery, and my number 8 hike. Coming in at number 7 is Old Rag at Shenandoah National Park. This is absolutely one of the famous hikes in the eastern half of the country, and so much fun. And a lot of these are part of what makes them fun for me is that they're strenuous, and this one certainly is that. It's not as much elevation gain as say something like Guadalupe Peak is, but you do the first couple of miles just in a woods trail, and then you get up to the exposed part of Old Rag Mountain, which is what makes it unique. And it's this scramble over boulders and through crevices and all these obstacles, and so much. I mean, it's a ton of work for someone who has no climbing background like myself. And it's not a technical climb. You don't need ropes or gear or anything like this. It's doable. But you have to work in a completely different way than on most hikes to pull yourself up over this. And great views back towards the main ridge of Shenandoah National Park. Old Rag is just east of sort of Skyline Drive in the main section of the park, so you have to drive outside of the park and around a little bit. But beautiful scenery, just sort of legendary, fun, rigorous climb. And then the way back down, you can make a loop of it, and it's you don't have to do quite the scrambling on the way back down that you have to do on the way back up or on the way up. But tons of fun, great views, legendary eastern scenery. So with all those things taken into consideration, makes Old Rag number 7 on my list. Number 6 is Lost Canyon in Canyonlands National Park. Did a trip out there. I've been out that way several times, but my buddy Rich and I did a trip out there. And now Canyonlands is divided sort of into 3 sections. The most accessible is the Islands in the Sky section, which is just kind of literally across the highway from Arches National Park, but real near Moab, Utah. And then south of there, it's about a 90-mile drive to get to the Needles section. So that's still pretty easy to get to. You can get right to the trailheads by car. And then for the more adventurous, there's the Maze section, which is more difficult to get to, and it's that section of Utah where I can't think of the name of the movie where the guy had to cut his arm off to survive. That's where that happened, was in that section of real back remote section of Canyonlands National Park. But the Needle section, so it's not quite as heavily visited as Islands in the Sky, but it's not like too far out of the way that it's exactly difficult to get to. But then there's this whole series, there's different loops that all come off of the park road there, and I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. But we did, at the recommendation of the ranger there, we did Lost Canyon. And it just gets you on this, a lot of this slick rock, exposed sections of just this sculpted landscape that's just sort of almost indescribable in how unique it is, and panoramic views of this landscape that's just really unique in the world. And so It's there's some elevation change, but not a huge amount. But the terrain and the climbing, down some ladders into the canyon and wayfinding using the different markings and the cairns, and it's 10 miles of fun. It was just such an adventure, and it's kind of what you feel like. You feel like you're just having this like almost old Western iconic adventure through there, and completely unlike any other landscape, even in southern Utah. There's so much variation. It's all this sort of slick rock and sandstone formations, but each one of them unique in and of themselves. So amazing fun and amazing experience. Coming in at number 5 on my list of the top 10 national park hikes then is the South Kaibab Trail in Grand Canyon National Park. And I've done a few different hikes in the Grand Canyon, the Rim, and I've done Bright Angel, came back up Bright Angel, and I've done South Kaibab a few different times, a couple times just going halfway, and then one time making what probably wasn't the best decision to hike to the bottom and back in a day. My ex-wife and I did the hike down South Kaibab and then back up Bright Angel, and it was grueling. Probably physically about the most difficult thing I've ever done. But South Kaibab is my favorite. And the reason for that is, unlike Bright Angel kind of follows a canyon, kind of an inlet in the Grand Canyon. So the views are great, but they're kind of confined by the ridges on either side of you as you walk down the canyon. And South Kaibab comes off of the South Rim, and after an initial section of switchbacks kind of follows one of the ridges. So you just have all of these panoramic views looking up and down the canyon. And it's one of the things I really like about hikes is when the whole hike is the payoff. And that's absolutely the case on South Kaibab. It's just from the minute you start to the minute you get to the bottom, it's just this change of scenery and spectacular scenery. The other thing that's nice about it is you don't have to get super far to get to the first real payoff. So I think it's probably about 1.5 miles from the trailhead to Ooh-Ah Point. And that's the first, big panoramic view. And so it's down, but a 3-mile hike, even with the elevation change, is doable for a lot of people, especially in, once it warms up a little bit. I've done it in sort of late winter, early spring, where you need traction devices and some poles because the upper slopes can be a little icy. But once that clears out, it's you still have to know what you're in for. It's not easy because you do have to hike 1.5 miles, straight uphill to get back out. But it's not overwhelming for people, and getting down into the Grand Canyon is really sort of the best way, I think, to experience it, because it's not this flat horizon. It just gives you a different appreciation for the vastness of the canyon. And if you go halfway down South Kaibab to Skeleton Point, you get views of the river below. One of my absolute favorite photographs of all time in the national parks, I took a panorama from South Kaibab, and I talked about that in my winter national parks video. But just amazing scenery, and to me that's the sort of best. You have to work for it. Down to Skeleton, I think, is maybe a 6-mile round trip or thereabouts. It might be a little more than that. But that effort gets you like sort of the most true Grand Canyon experience you can have. And then you can keep going down there all the way to the river to Phantom Ranch and stay overnight. And if you're crazy or really fit, you can do it as a day hike, but the Park Service strongly discourages you from doing it as a day hike, and I should have listened, but I made it out without help. So anyway, South Kaibab, my favorite way to see the Grand Canyon, and number 4 on my list, actually number 5 on my list of national parks hikes. At number 4 then, and so I'm cheating a little bit here. I'm trying not to double up hikes so that I don't have 2 hikes from any one park site. So I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat here because I couldn't decide at Glacier National Park whether I like Grinnell Glacier or whether I like the Garden Wall as my favorite hike there and my 4th favorite national parks hike. Garden Wall is aptly named. If you go there sort of in July, there's bare grass and wildflowers, and It leaves right from Logan Pass, so it's real easy to get to. The first section is it's kind of cut into a steep slope, so it's not exactly like a cliff drop off, but if you have real issues with heights, it's probably not going to be your favorite section of hike ever. But it is just, I mean, it just gets you into these grand Glacier National Park vistas, and you're above the tree line so you can see for miles. And I've done it a couple of times where there were, or one of the times I did it, there were forest fires, so that kind of clouded up some of the vistas a bit. But that's totally amazing. And then if you drive a little bit north to the Many Glacier section of the park, you can catch the Grinnell Glacier Trailhead. And that is just also, just an amazing, amazing hike. And whereas Garden Wall has, first of all, it's if you do that as an out and back from Logan Pass, it's very level. So it doesn't take your up 5,000 feet, but it doesn't take tremendous cardiovascular ability to do it. Grinnell Glacier is an uphill hike from Many Glacier up to Grinnell Glacier, past Grinnell Lake. And Garden Wall, like I said earlier, is kind of the payoff from the get-go. Grinnell Glacier, it's a beautiful forest hike, and some openings to the lakes and things like that, but it really takes you sort of a mile and a half to get up onto the slopes, and then you get these views of Grinnell Lake and the turquoise waters. And sentimentally, I proposed to my wife on the Grinnell Glacier hike overlooking Grinnell Lake. So I guess I'm going to give that one, for sentimental reasons, just that little bit of an edge. But you can't go wrong with either of them. But that being said, there's Garden Wall, and my number 4 national parks hike, Grinnell Lake hike, or Grinnell Glacier hike at Glacier National Park. Number 3 is the Navajo Queen's Garden Loop at Bryce Canyon National Park. And they call this the best 3-mile hike in the country. And if there is a better 3-mile hike in the world, I don't know where it is or how it's possible, because you get the complete Bryce Canyon experience. It's elevation gain in the rims, 8,000 feet, so it's not easy. But just amazing, amazing views. You hike down through the hoodoos and then back along the rim, and it's so much fun and so unbelievable. And it's one of these real, like, almost Dr. Seuss landscapes, but it's real, and you can't believe it. And it's the best 3-mile hike you'll ever go on. Just trust me. And unbelievable scenery, iconic scenery, and definitely a contender as the best hike you'll ever do. It's number 3 on my list. But we're getting really close here and trying to decide which is better than the other. So amazing, amazing hike. Queen's Garden Navajo Loop. Then coming at number 2, so this is even better than Queen's Garden Navajo Loop, is the Boy Scout Trail at Redwoods National Park. And there's so many great hikes at Redwoods. Actually, it's Redwoods National and State Park. So Boy Scout Trail is actually in Jedediah Smith Redwoods State Park, but they're all kind of attached together and administered. If you go into the ranger station, they'll recommend things in any of the parks, the state parks, or the national park section. So as a visitor, they all kind of function as one thing. Anyways, the Boy Scout Trail, especially sort of the first mile and a half of it, is the perfect redwoods hike. It's this section of, you have the fern-covered floor, and you've got the, 10, 15 foot wide trunks of redwood trees climbing, 150 feet up before you get to the canopy. And almost nothing else. I mean, it's just so you could see through it and smell the pine scent, and it's so and the way the light filters through, it's just the most peaceful place you'll ever be. And I mean, just absolutely marvelous, incredible scenery, and kind of the most peaceful parks experience I've ever had. I've had some really sort of peaceful, sublime parks experiences, but just like the air in that from the pine, and it's indescribably beautiful, indescribably peaceful, and how this isn't number one is, now that I'm thinking about it, is amazing to me until I start talking about the next one. But God, I love the redwoods. One of the most amazing things I'll ever see in my life. This is what the great cathedrals aspire to be, but can't ever be. It is so grand and magnificent that one of the best experiences you'll ever have, and number 2 on my list of the top national parks hikes. So that leaves the number 1 hike on my list of my top 10 national parks hikes. And somehow this has beat out all of the others that I've done in the national parks, which is amazing because they're all amazing. They're just, God, I love the parks, but obviously. But my number 1 national parks hike is Cascade Canyon in Grand Teton National Park. This is everything you could ever hope for in a hike. It's grand, it's peaceful, it's sounds great, it's just indescribably beautiful scenery. So Grand Teton National Park, you have the Teton Range and then the valley in front of it with, you know, Jackson Lake and Jenny Lake. And so to get to Cascade Canyon, you can hike around Jenny Lake, or you can they have a boat that'll ferry you across. So I took the boat across, then you have sort of some switchbacks up to an overview, back east across all of the lakes. And I mean, that right there is amazing views. And then you cut back in to sort of a hanging glacial canyon that goes between the peaks of the Tetons and then west back into sort of the interior of Grand Teton National Park. And you have these perfect mountains, you know, with snow on the sides and waterfalls cascading down from either side of you, and then the river going through the middle. And so there's reflections off of the river with the trees and the mountains in the background, and just this sound of rushing water the whole time. And so from the trailhead where the boat leaves you off back, I think it's about 4.5 miles to where you get to a trail junction. And that's sort of the end of Cascade Canyon. You can take that on to other equally amazing sites. And then there'll be wildlife. We didn't see them on the hike, but there's moose in there. And I mean, geez, it's just everything you would ever want in a hike. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you stuck with me for this kind of longish video about hiking through the national parks. I just can't get enough of this stuff. I'm sure there are so many more hikes out there that I haven't done that would make this list even tougher to compile. If you've done some of your favorite hikes, you know, any of the 15 or 16 that I've mentioned, or any other ones that you know, at parks I've mentioned that you can't believe I left out, or parks I need to get to because there's other hikes that are just as amazing or more amazing than these, you know, leave some comments in the comment section below. I really hope you like this video, and if you want to see about the parks, about park topics, more lists, overviews of parks, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of those. And thanks for taking the time to watch this, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.